June 14th, 1944. For 30 hours, the alarm klaxon wailed across Thorpe Abbott's airbase in Norfolk, England, piercing through the pre-dawn darkness. James Mitchell jolted awake in the barracks, his body instantly tensing at the sound. Mitchell was 17 years old. His enlistment papers said 18. No one had questioned it during processing. Mitchell was a tail gunner for the 100th Bomb Group, one of the most dangerous assignments in the entire Army Air Forces. This was his 6th combat mission in 4 weeks. This would be the mission that changed everything about how the entire German Luftwaffe would view American bomber defense. The crew quarters filled with activity. Men stumbled out of bunks, still half asleep. Mitchell pulled on his flight suit over thermal underwear. The suit was heavy, designed to keep him warm at 30,000 feet where temperatures reached 50 degrees below zero. Mitchell checked his equipment carefully. Oxygen mask, heated gloves, heated boots, parachute, emergency kit. Every item was essential for survival. Mitchell had learned that lesson during his first mission when a gunner from another crew had frozen to death in his turret after his heating suit malfunctioned at altitude. The mess hall smelled of eggs and coffee and cigarette smoke. Men ate breakfast mechanically, not tasting the food. The anxiety was palpable in the room. Experienced flyers could sense when the casualty rate would be high. Today felt like a high casualty day. Today felt like a day when some crews would not return. The briefing room filled with aircrew members. The room was crowded, packed with pilots, co-pilots, bombardiers, navigators, radio men, and gunners. Captain Harold Bennett stood at the front of the room, pointing at a map. The red string marked the route. The red string led to Leipzig, Germany. Leipzig meant danger. Leipzig meant German fighter interceptors would be waiting. Leipzig meant flak would be intense. Leipzig meant casualty rates would exceed 20%. Target is the Messerschmitt aircraft factory at Leipzig, Bennett announced. 450 B-17s will participate in this mission. We expect heavy fighter resistance. Expect aggressive attacks. Expect casualties. Bennett paused, letting the words sink in. Of 100 bomber crews, 20 will not return today. 20%. 1 in 5. Understand that clearly. German fighters will attack in coordinated formation. German fighters will concentrate on bombers that show weakness in defensive positions. German fighters will use every tactic they have learned. Bennett looked directly at Mitchell. Bennett was 32 years old. Bennett had flown 23 previous combat missions. Bennett had become experienced enough to recognize exceptional talent. Bennett knew that Mitchell was that exceptional talent. Our defensive fire is our greatest asset, Bennett continued. Every gunner position will be tested today. Every gunner will have targets. Our job is to drop our bomb load on target and bring this aircraft home with maximum crew members alive. That depends on each and every one of you. Understand that today your defensive fire will determine who lives and who dies. Mitchell's hands trembled slightly as he sat in the briefing. Mitchell understood the statistics better than most. Mitchell had reviewed combat reports from previous missions. Mitchell knew that tail gunners had casualty rates exceeding 50%. Mitchell knew that many gunners did not complete their first 25 mission tour. Mitchell tried not to think about those odds. Mitchell focused on preparation instead. The crew completed final preparations. Mitchell walked to the bomber with the other gunners. The B-17 was massive, a 4-engine heavy bomber loaded with 8 1,000-pound bombs. The aircraft looked heavy on the tarmac, weighted down with fuel and ordnance. Mitchell climbed into the fuselage through the bomb bay doors. Mitchell walked past the waist gunner positions. Mitchell walked past the ball turret position in the bomber's belly. Mitchell climbed into the tail turret position. The tail turret was frozen solid in the pre-dawn cold. Mitchell's breath instantly crystallized on his oxygen mask. Mitchell's hands were already becoming numb despite the heated gloves. Mitchell tested his twin .50 caliber machine guns with meticulous precision. The guns were perfectly maintained. The ammunition was loaded. The gun sights were aligned. Mitchell cycled the guns several times, listening to the mechanical sounds. The guns responded perfectly. Mitchell was ready for combat. Mitchell's heart was racing with adrenaline and anxiety mixed together. The B-17 engine started one by one. The sound was deafening. The propellers began rotating. The engines warmed up for takeoff. Mitchell sat in the tail turret watching the other bombers starting their engines. The entire airfield was becoming filled with noise and smoke and vibration. 450 bombers preparing for flight. The B-17s launched into the dawn sky. 450 heavy bombers taking off in sequence, each one laden with bombs and fuel and 10 crew members. The bombers climbed into formation, each pilot working to find his designated position. The formation stretched for miles across English sky. The formation was designed for maximum defensive firepower. Multiple bombers in defensive box formations meant concentrated machine gun fire from dozens of aircraft aimed at any attacking fighter. The bombers climbed steadily. Altitude climbed to 10,000 feet. Altitude climbed to 20,000 feet. Altitude climbed to 30,000 feet and then higher. The bombers cruised at bombing altitude where the thin air and extreme cold made physical existence almost unbearable. Mitchell's electrically heated suit kept him functional, but the cold still penetrated everything. Mitchell's breath froze on his oxygen mask. Mitchell's fingers remained flexible only because of continuous movement. Mitchell remained alert, scanning the sky constantly. Every moment could bring German fighters. Every direction could bring catastrophic danger. Fighter escort joined the formation. P-51 Mustang fighters flew top cover positions. P-47 Thunderbolt fighters flew sweep positions ahead of the formation. The American fighters were designed to protect bombers from German interceptors. The American fighters were equipped with long-range fuel tanks, allowing them to fly all the way to Berlin and back. The American fighters were fast and maneuverable and deadly, but there were never enough fighters to protect all the bombers. Gaps in fighter coverage existed. German pilots exploited those gaps with coordinated attacks. The flight to Leipzig took nearly 4 hours. For hours of monotonous flying broken by intense anxiety. For hours of cold that seemed to penetrate every layer of clothing. For hours of scanning the sky for the enemy. Mitchell remained alert. Mitchell's eyes were tired, but Mitchell forced himself to remain focused. The stakes were too high for distraction. Hundreds of lives depended on gunners maintaining vigilance. Radio chatter increased as the formation approached Germany. Fighter controllers were reporting German fighter activity on radar. German fighters were scrambling to intercept. German Bf-109s were climbing to altitude. German Fw-190s were maneuvering to attack position. American fighter escorts began searching for German fighters ahead of the bomber stream. Mitchell heard radio transmissions. Mitchell heard excited voices of fighter pilots engaged in combat. Several engagements developed at the periphery of the formation. American fighters shot down 2 German fighters. German fighters damaged 3 American fighters. The bomber formation continued unchanged toward Leipzig, relentless in its approach to the target. The anti-aircraft fire began before the bomb run. Flak bursts filled the sky around the formation with sudden explosions. Black smoke appeared in formations. Explosions erupted simultaneously from hundreds of flak shells. Shrapnel pinged off the B-17's fuselage, creating loud metallic sounds. One bomber directly ahead of Hellcat's Revenge took multiple direct flak hits. The bomber caught fire and fell away from the formation, trailing flames and smoke. Parachutes opened. Mitchell watched and counted. For parachutes, 5 parachutes, 6 parachutes, 7 parachutes, 8 parachutes, 9 parachutes, 10. The bomber exploded. 1 crew member did not escape. 1 young American would not be going home. 2 minutes to bomb run, the bombardier announced through the intercom. Captain Bennett began the descent to precise bombing altitude. The formation descended gradually. The target appeared below through breaks in the clouds. The Messerschmitt factory was clearly visible. The factory complex was massive. Multiple buildings, multiple production lines. The factory was the primary target for today's mission. The factory had to be destroyed. That moment is when the attack began. 25 Messerschmitt Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf Fw-190s dove out of the sun at high altitude. The German fighters had been waiting above the formation at altitudes where they could not be easily detected by the bomber's gunners. The German fighters dove through gaps in the American fighter escort. The gaps had been carefully identified through German intelligence. The gaps had been exploited with coordinated precision. The fighters attacked with devastating coordination. Multiple fighters targeted individual bombers. The first pass was devastating to the bomber formation. Mitchell saw the lead fighter as it dove past the formation. The fighter was at 9 o'clock position relative to the tail. Mitchell swung his guns instantly. Mitchell's reflexes were sharp. Mitchell had prepared for this exact moment through hundreds of training rounds. Mitchell tracked the fighter with mechanical precision. The closing speed was tremendous. 50 miles per hour relative closure at minimum. The fighter was moving at maximum dive speed, nearly 400 miles per hour. Mitchell led the target with practiced accuracy. Mitchell compensated for deflection angle with unconscious calculation. Mitchell fired his twin machine guns. 800 rounds per minute per gun. 1,600 total rounds per minute. The sound was deafening. The recoil pushed Mitchell backward. The bullets flew at the German fighter with velocity that would pierce aircraft aluminum. The Bf-109 broke right violently, diving away with desperate evasive maneuvers. The fighter dove away from the tail position. Mitchell's bullets missed, but came close enough that the German pilot realized he had made a tactical mistake attacking this particular B-17. The fighter rejoined the attack formation, but stayed at distance from the tail, maintaining defensive separation. A second fighter made a diving pass at the left wing. The top turret gunner opened fire continuously. The nose gunner opened fire with coordinated fire. The formation's mass firepower was bringing down fighters, but German pilots kept attacking. A third fighter dove directly at the formation from a 6 o'clock position, directly at Mitchell's tail. This fighter was aggressive. This fighter was determined. This pilot seemed to be ignoring the danger represented by the tail turret. The fighter came within firing range. Mitchell immediately began tracking. Mitchell calculated deflection angle instantly. Mitchell fired continuously at the approaching threat. His bullets walked across the German fighter's fuselage methodically. The cockpit area was hit by multiple rounds. The FW-190 began smoking heavily. The fighter fell away, trailing thick black smoke. Mitchell was certain he had gotten his first kill of the day. First blood, Mitchell whispered to himself. One down. Stay alert. More coming. German fighters regrouped. German radio transmissions indicated pilots were discussing the B-17's exceptional tail defense. German pilots acknowledged the threat from the tail position with respect and fear. German pilots adjusted tactics. German pilots decided to focus attacks on bombers with less defensive capability. Mitchell heard radio transmissions. Mitchell knew German pilots were specifically avoiding direct engagement with Hellcat's revenge. The bomb run began. Captain Bennett maintained perfect formation position despite the fighter attacks. The bombardier tracked the target carefully through his bomb sight. The Messerschmitt factory filled the bombardier's view completely. Every detail was visible. Every building was visible. Every production line was visible. The bomb load was released. 8 1,000-pound bombs fell toward the factory. The bombs impacted and exploded. The factory caught fire. Massive explosions erupted across the factory complex. The mission was successful. The bombing run was complete. But the fight was not finished. German fighters attacked again with renewed determination. This time they focused attacks on bombers to the left and right of Hellcat's revenge. 3 fighters targeted the bomber to the left simultaneously. The bomber's defenses were active, but the German pilots were experienced. 1 bomber took multiple cannon hits. The bomber began smoking severely. The bomber fell away from formation. The crew abandoned the stricken aircraft. Parachutes opened. The bomber crashed into Germany below. Another crew destroyed. A 4th German fighter made a head-on pass at the formation. The nose gunner fired. The top turret gunner fired. The fighter pressed through and broke away violently. No bomber was hit. The fighters were adjusting their attack patterns after learning lessons from previous passes. A 5th fighter made a pass directly at Mitchell's turret. This pilot seemed determined to eliminate the threat represented by this particular tail gunner. The fighter closed rapidly from behind and slightly above. Mitchell opened fire at extremely close distance. The German fighter's windscreen shattered under the impact of bullets. The cockpit area exploded in a hail of projectiles. The German pilot was killed instantly. The FW-190 went into an uncontrolled spin. The fighter disappeared below the formation. Mitchell's second confirmed kill came at point-blank range. Mitchell's heart was racing with adrenaline. Mitchell's breathing was rapid. Mitchell forced himself to remain calm. Mitchell remained focused on scanning for the next threat. Mitchell knew more attacks would come. Mitchell knew German pilots were getting desperate. Mitchell knew they would try harder to eliminate this threat. A coordinated group of 4 fighters dove at the formation from multiple angles. These fighters were experienced. These fighters were attacking with precision and coordination. These pilots seemed committed to destroying Hellcat's revenge. Mitchell began tracking the lead fighter. Mitchell fired continuously. The first fighter broke away under intensive defensive fire. Mitchell tracked the second fighter. Mitchell fired continuously. The second fighter took multiple hits. The fighter pulled up steeply and fell away damaged. The third fighter closed to very short range. This pilot was determined to attack Mitchell's position directly. Mitchell realized this was a pilot who was specifically targeting him based on his previous kills. Mitchell fired continuously at extreme, close distance. The German fighter took repeated impacts. The cockpit was damaged. The engine began smoking. The fighter fell away, smoking heavily. Mitchell believed he had gotten his third kill. Mitchell's body was burning with adrenaline. Mitchell's focus was absolute. Mitchell's hands remained steady on the gun controls. Mitchell remained in position, scanning for threats. Mitchell's arm was still bleeding from yesterday's wound, but Mitchell ignored the pain. More German fighters attempted passes, but turned away when they saw the defensive fire. The formation's mass firepower was deterring coordinated attacks. German radio transmissions indicated that pilots were being advised to avoid direct engagement with Hellcat's revenge. German pilots were recognizing that attacking this particular B-17 resulted in their aircraft being damaged or destroyed. German commanders were ordering pilots to preserve their aircraft and lives. German strategy was shifting to avoid the tail position completely. A fifth fighter attempted a head-on pass at medium distance. Mitchell could not fire forward because of the bomber's configuration, but the German pilot did not know this. The German pilot saw the nose turret and top turret responding and turn away. The formation continued unmolested. Mitchell's fourth confirmed kill came when a fighter tried to execute a pass at the tail while at medium distance. Mitchell led the target precisely with studied calculation. Mitchell's bullets converged on the fighter. The fighter's engine began smoking. The fighter fell away, trailing smoke and fire. The fighter descended below the formation and disappeared. German fighters began pulling back. German radio transmissions indicated that pilots were being ordered to preserve their aircraft. German commanders recognized that the formation's defensive firepower was overwhelming. German strategy shifted to attacking other bomber formations with less defensive capability. Hellcat's revenge had proven too dangerous. The formation began the return flight to England. German fighters remained in the area, but were no longer attacking aggressively. Threat level had diminished significantly. The bombers began a gradual climb to altitude for the return flight. Mitchell remained alert. Mitchell scanned constantly. Mitchell's eyes were tired. Mitchell's mind was still operating at combat intensity. A final German fighter made one last aggressive pass at the tail. Mitchell was ready. Mitchell fired continuously. The fighter took hits. The fighter twisted away, smoking. Mitchell's fifth confirmed kill was complete. Over the North Sea, Mitchell finally saw the English coast. The bombers descended toward the landing fields. Hellcat's revenge touched down on the runway at Thorpe Abbotts. The flight was complete. The mission was successful. Mitchell had survived another day. Mitchell climbed down from the tail turret. His hands were shaking. His body was exhausted. His mind was still operating at combat intensity. The interrogation officer debriefed Mitchell extensively. Mitchell described every engagement. Mitchell confirmed kills. Mitchell described German fighter behavior. Mitchell described how German pilots had changed tactics after recognizing the threat. Intelligence officers reviewed the engagement report. Other crews confirmed seeing Mitchell's tail position produce devastating defensive fire. Other crews confirmed seeing German fighters damaged or destroyed in the vicinity of Hellcat's revenge. Other crews confirmed that German fighter attacks on nearby bombers increased, while attacks on Hellcat's revenge decreased markedly. Final tally for the mission was confirmed. James Mitchell had engaged German fighters in 10 separate combat incidents. James Mitchell had achieved 5 confirmed kills. 5 German fighters destroyed in a single mission by a 17-year-old tail gunner. This was extraordinary. This was unprecedented. James Mitchell had now established himself as the most dangerous defensive gunner in the entire bomber command. German fighter pilot debriefings that day mentioned the difficulty of attacking the particular B-17. German pilots reported that the tail gunner on that bomber was extraordinarily accurate. German pilots reported that attacking that bomber directly resulted in aircraft damage or loss. German pilots requested that future missions focus on bombers other than the one with the exceptional tail gunner. German command noted that enemy bomber defensive capability was increasing. German commanders realized that young American gunners had become as dangerous as experienced pilots. German Luftwaffe intelligence files were updated that day. The file for Hellcat's Revenge was marked with a red warning symbol. German pilots were instructed to avoid direct engagement with this bomber. German pilots were informed that attacking this bomber directly would result in loss. German strategy shifted to focus on other bombers in the formation. James Mitchell completed his military service and returned to America after the war. Mitchell never spoke publicly about his combat experience. Mitchell lived a quiet civilian life. But military records documented that James Mitchell had become one of the most successful tail gunners in the European theater based on confirmed combat victories achieved through defensive fire. Mitchell represented the best of American courage and skill under extreme conditions. Mitchell represented the determination of young Americans to defend freedom against tyranny.